Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see where I can stand so you can see this as well. There we go. Okay, yeah. So this is a talk about the future of apps, and apps are obviously a real big thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about apps in general for the first half, and then we're going to talk about dApps in particular. So there's plenty of blockchain content coming. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the blockchain and the AI, how they are going to go together, and also how we're going to interact with computers in the future. And we're also going to get to the question on everybody's lips, which is, what the hell is urbit anyway? So first of all, what exactly are apps? Apps are programs in user space. If you imagine that you've got a kernel like this, on every operating system, you have the apps on top. Apps often come with things like SDKs, allowing the app developer to access more of the underlying operating system features. Apps come in all shapes and sizes. They include things like command line apps, but really the sort of apps I'm thinking about and talking about are the apps that originated a long time ago when sort of modern desktop computing really took off. The apps today, however, are, when you talk to most of your family and friends about apps, they're going to be thinking about things like this. And what we've sort of realized over time is apps are really useful for a set of things, including they're designed to fulfill a goal. For example, if you want to stay somewhere, or you want to travel somewhere, or you just want to be entertained, you first of all reach for an app. In fact, so much so that I've actually organized some of my apps in folders around verbs, because when you start thinking of apps as verbs, then you start thinking about, what is this thing going to do and why would somebody click it? Apps are also a human interface to data. If you imagine you've got all these machines around you, we're talking to lots of machines now, but we can't plug in directly. So we need a translation layer. We need to go some way from human, emotional human language to binary. And if you ask a developer to make an app, you often end up with something like this, a backend developer, because developers are always thinking about efficiency. How much can I cram in? How much can something do, like in terms of like bandwidth and storage space? But when you ask a designer to do it, designers have a whole new set of concerns. They're thinking much more on the human level. How do we make this thing readable? How do we make it fun to use? So engineers optimize for space and designers optimize for readability. Designers also know that apps are fundamentally an emotional experience. For example, there's nothing more emotional than actually transferring a large amount of money. And yet, how many developers put specific paths of the application in, or specific error messages in for larger amounts than smaller amounts? Always think about the sort of emotional components of what you're doing. So the apps we use today, well, the ones that are popular, the ones that all your friends and family use, are the ones that people talk about the most, the Instagrams, the TikToks, and so on. But of course, apps weren't like this some time ago. In fact, the App Store really started in 2008. This is where the whole sort of app revolution kicked off. The very first NFT-like app was this one, which people put on their home screen just to flex to the fact that they had $1,000 to spend. Of course, some of you will remember the apps that came after that followed, including Angry Birds and Flappy Bird and all the other birds, and the enormous growth that we saw in the App Store. In fact, apps were the first and easy way for most people to monetize their talents. It was a really good opportunity for developers to learn a language that they'd never even come across before, this thing called Objective-C, because they knew it was worth spending the time and actually turning their hours of learning this weird language into some money. Back then, everyone had an idea for an app. I would talk to my friends and they would say, hey, I've got this idea, it's going to make me rich. Some wanted to solve problems for other people, and some others just wanted to scratch their own itch. But these days, the problem is that you don't hear much about this anymore. In fact, the reality of creating apps these days is that building an app means building a business. And few people have the desire to build a business. It's often said to lots of people, a little bit less so now, but in the past, people were told, all you need to do is teach yourself to code. It's easy, right? But as someone who has been coding since the age of 16, I'm just not a fan of this excuse. In fact, I actually think coding sucks. There's so many things about coding that I think are just fundamentally broken and will never change. And personally, I'm here to build things for people. I'm not here to like wrestle with this every day. In fact, even our own Ligi came across this recently where Brian Armstrong tried to merge something in and it wasn't at the same right formatting and things. Anyway, even if you can code, let's just say you teach yourself how to code, it's all very good. You've still got to deal with these other things that come up when you build an app, because building an app means building a business, right? So all of these things need to be solved. And if you're building a Web3 app, by the way, you have all of these plus a whole new page of other concerns to think about. We'll get to some of those in a moment. So the reality is that building an app means spending some money. There's just no other way to do it. So people go to all the VCs, they go to Silicon Valley, and they say, please, sir, can I have some money because I want to build this app? It's really going to be massive and so on. But even if you do raise the money, you realize that nobody can build everything in-house. It's just impossible to do that big list. So what we end up with today is we end up with startups starting as basically glorified companies that have about 10 or so different SaaS subscriptions to all these other providers that build the building blocks of your app. And I know this because I'm building one at the moment, and this is the amount I'm spending just to get this very small thing off the ground. And of course, if you peel back that layer, what do you realize? That they're all hosted with the same three companies, basically. All of those live on the same hosting providers. The reality of all this means it's very hard to get like niche ideas off the ground. If you want to build something big and mainstream, you may get some funding. But if you want to build something very esoteric, good luck with that. So how about if you're an indie developer? Well, some indie developers do actually get somewhere. In fact, the very most famous indie developer of all time is this guy called Levels.io. And he actually made this website some while ago when generative AI was coming out. And it would basically make different faces of you. I played around with it. It was very cool. But sadly, the much more well-funded VC-based startup, Lenza, had the engineering resources and the talent on hand to completely obliterate the indie developer. And we see this a lot of times. So the sad truth about how we are thinking about apps today is that many of these apps don't ever get made. But the desire to create them hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. We see that because lots of people like to think about Figma. They draw out how the app should work. In fact, if anyone wants to make an app, the first thing I say is get yourself a notebook and a pen and paper and draw out every single screen, including every single error message. It really makes you think about how the app's going to work. We also see with Figma, people posting all these cool little interactions online. The desire to create apps is there. It's just that no one's able to join everything up at the moment. So it's laid dormant for many years, but things are about to change very quickly because, as everyone knows now, the whole AI explosion is here to change all of coding, all of app development, and frankly, I think mostly for the better. So what do we have? We have a series of major leaps coming forward. We have Google being replaced by Bing, kind of, maybe, let's see. We have AI helping us with pretty much all aspects of our life these days, including the ability to do unexpected emergent behavior, which I find really fascinating. The ability to mock up new designs, this one for a new Nike trainer. And of course, most importantly, the ability to use things like ChatGPT and Codex to actually help us code. This is where the real innovation is going to come from. So for the very first time, all of you non-coders in the audience who always outnumber the coders are thinking, maybe there's hope for me. Maybe I can turn this big idea I've had in my head for so many years and finally turn it into an app. Honestly, I think you're in luck because knowing Silicon Valley, there will be many, many teams working on this right now, very well funded. And what I suspect we'll see in the next year is an app that you install once onto your mobile, and inside you go in and you can either create an app inside that sort of big mega app, or you'll just be able to use other people's creations, and they'll be very limited, but they'll do something, and something is better than nothing. So I think I would certainly say 1 to 2 years maximum for this. However, this is the however, and this is where we come in and start thinking about dApps. The thing about the way the apps work at the moment is that every single platform out there is basically offering an app to you as one square. And the way that this works is that this one square sort of accesses a whole world of that app. You know, the app developer has spent a long time, so you're in there, you push the button, and now you enter their world. This is really good for focus because it gives you these immersive experiences. But there's a problem with this, and all those app shiny interfaces, that all those shiny squares, right, are there sucking up your data, because all the data that you put into this app is really, really difficult to get out. So I think about it in my head as like a really nice fancy pants restaurant you go to, you're paying a lot of money, everything looks good, but then suddenly you need to get the hell out of there, or you've got an emergency, you realize there's no API, there's no way of getting your data back out again. And maybe if you're very, very lucky, some of the big ones like Google offer this feature where you can export all their data. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that. I did once, and I was taken to a website that looked a bit like this. Not so much as good as the fancy pants restaurant. And even if you do manage to get your data out, what you realize is that the data looks like this, and without code, it's pretty useless. So today's app ecosystem looks like this: islands of your data on your phone, sucking up your data, not talking to each other, and ultimately, you don't own and control any of it. But that's not all, because there's some other big issues that AI apps, which are coming for sure, aren't going to fix. The first one is the App Store itself. The worst thing that's happening at the moment is that many great ideas aren't being made, because even if they are getting made, they can easily be deplatformed. We see this time and time again when you say the wrong things online, and your app suddenly disappears or is at risk of being disappeared. Also, a lot of apps are discontinued. Back in November, I spent ages telling people how great this app was, only to realize that now they've shut up and the app is no longer there, meaning that there's actually no way of getting that data out. Now, thankfully, because they're good developers, they did think of a way, but most people aren't so lucky. Okay, the other problem with app stores is the complete crazy behavior that we all think is fine. The fact that you see those terms and conditions that you never read when you installed the app, nobody else did either. Well, they basically allow that indie startup, that really cool app that you like, to sell all of your data to some mega corporation without your permission, without having to tell you, without giving you any say in that matter whatsoever. In fact, there's a website where all of these exits are celebrated. In fact, you can read through time and time again all the usual letters of, hey, we're so excited, we've sold our startup for lots of money, and we've sold it to this big corporation that now owns your data. So the main reason this existing model has a real problem to me is that so many things never get on the App Store in the first place. In fact, what we've seen time and time again is that anything of real meaningful change, anything that's going to allow you to do, for example, truly end-to-end encryption, is either going to be banned entirely, watered down, or banned in some countries that actually matter, where it's needed the most. So you think, okay, that's the apps, you know, let's quit talking about the App Store, let's talk about the web, right? We're all building dApps here. Okay, so what about the web? Well, I said I started coding when I was 16, I did. Back then, CSS was a proposal, it was not actually something anything used, and my first coding experience looked like this. It was just HTML. These days, the web is full of so many achingly exhausting possibilities of ways to build things with different frameworks and different languages, that even if I was starting off today as a newbie, I wouldn't frankly have a clue where to start. Oh yeah, and you always have to deal with this. So it's fundamentally broken, the web, because it relies on this really outdated model that HTML, which was only ever meant for actually describing documents, has now been shoehorned into doing these full apps, and then shoehorned again to make dApps. And the web's always going to fail us because it has no idea of local storage. And yes, of course, there is the Web3 local storage thing that, you know, window.local storage. But as any of you web developers know, if you open that up in a private browsing window, that's going to disappear the moment you close the tab, and users do that all the time. So it's effectively useless. Because there's no local storage, that means there's no place to put your private keys, which means you can't really use it for any sort of wallet apart from a burner wallet. And worst of all, no matter where you put your website, it has to be hosted somewhere. And most of the time, even if you're going through another provider, they're probably going to be using Amazon underneath. So we need to find some new solutions. It's at this point in the talk where my talk now diverges from another talk that I did 2 months ago, which is double the length of this and talks about all of those solutions from a bare bones approach. So if you're really interested in app development and rethinking app development, I did this at the Urbit Summit, the Volcano Summit in March, and it's this talk, but a lot bigger. Okay, I'm going to talk now about the blockchain things, because it is a blockchain conference after all. Okay, so what's going to save us from this demise? Open protocols are a big start and a big move in the right direction. Okay, open protocols, we all know them. The internet started off like this. We had IRC, we had SMTP and so on. And open protocols allowed us to have email, which is kind of the one that we all use today, doing this amazing thing where we can have multiple email clients and multiple email providers. So you can have Gmail and Apple Mail and things like that. Certainly not the original intention, which is everybody would run a server in their basement, but nevertheless, it's better than nothing because of this open protocol that allows us to move from one to another. Compare that with something like Airbnb, which is exactly the opposite. Airbnb is one app allowing you to talk to one provider, the Airbnb API. And of course, they store everything. It's closed source, it's a controlled experience. Nobody can build on it or change it in any way. So open protocols today look like this. Nostra is a really good one. It's very popular in the Bitcoin community, I've been learning. And Lens protocol, very popular in the Ethereum community. Both kind of do the same thing, although the implementation is very different. And we've really got to this point now where when you realize the power of open protocols, you can start to realize the power of composability, of actually building things on top that even the originators of the first protocol never could envisage. This is the real power. I look forward to a day that's inevitably coming where we have open protocols for food delivery, for car hire, and things like hiring a bike in a city. But all of this gives us something deeper. It enables a whole new type of business to emerge, and a business that using open protocols and decentralized services. Let's just go back to those apps a minute. If you remember this big list of things that we had to think about, well, if you imagine when you click on your Airbnb app, what you're really doing is you're opening the door to a vertically integrated tech stack, a tech stack where they have a big office, where they fill it with all people who do all the pricing engines, all the front end, and all the rest of it. They do the whole thing end to end. But Web3 helps us to change this. In fact, Web3 gives us a different way to build businesses entirely. In fact, we can start thinking about Airbnb more like this, where you have a base protocol that lets you stay somewhere, and then you have a series of matching engines that can all be operated by different companies, helping you find the very best place to stay, giving you recommendations, competing to find you the very best matches for you. And maybe at the end, you get to choose which insurance provider you want to use. So you can both negotiate a different insurance provider, which, you know, if you've ever done any Airbnb hosting, certainly going to be a good thing. An example of somebody building this sort of thing today, where they deliberately want people to build on it, is Talent Layer, which is run by Kirsten, who's sat at the back. Go and talk to her afterwards. Talent Layer have done an amazing job of building a protocol, a very base layer protocol, where they encourage people to build on top and make money from it. In fact, this idea is inspired by something bigger. This idea called hyperstructures is working towards a future where these protocols run in a decentralized manner, and they keep running, and the fees get lower and lower, and even if the company behind them disappears, the protocol still runs. Now, we've got a long way to get here, but I really think this is the right direction to go in. So decentralized services and open protocols give us this idea of unstoppable apps, uncensorable services, and permissionless composability. This is a real step to building apps the correct way. But let's get now to the challenges of all of this. What are the challenges of building your app in a decentralized way? Well, the first thing is, where the hell do we put the data, right? So, because we all know this, layer ones are too expensive at the moment, certainly Ethereum. And despite all the promises of how easy it will be to bridge things between layer twos, if you actually look into things like layer 0 and things like that, you realize that these solutions are neither easy, cheap, or fast. The sad thing is there's no composability between these layer twos. So the very thing that made Ethereum amazing in 2017, which was like all the ICOs and then again later, just a few years ago with all the DeFi summer, that is just not possible at the moment. In fact, it will never happen again because you just simply can't build on stuff when it is scattered and lives in so many different places. So what do you do if you're a developer? Well, you can do what I'm trying to do, which is to figure out where my friends are and consider building there, right? That's one option. But what if you don't have any friends, you don't know anyone in this ecosystem? What would you do? What would a rational developer do? Well, the rational developer, you go to layer 2 beat, you would look at the risks of building all these different chains. You would then scrutinize and go into each of these to make sure that the validators and the sequencers are up and running, and they'll never go down. You'll then do some metrics. You'll make sure that the chain is actually alive and that the lights are on and somebody's home, somebody's actually building on it. And then you'll take the very rational decision of choosing the layer 2 that's going to pay you the most. Because that's unfortunately what everybody is doing at the moment. They're looking at the ones that gives out the grants and the airdrop incentives. It's hardly a recipe for a great way of doing decentralized apps. So I've talked about this before. I did a talk in Bruno last year about all the issues around layer 1s and layer 2s. But thankfully, I'm no longer the only person talking about this, because just a few days ago in Amsterdam, Justin Bonds gave an amazing talk all about the issues of layer 2 scaling. And I really think if you're serious about building a decentralized app, this is a really good talk to watch. It'll be out in a few days. So why did we end up with this mess? Well, I've been asking myself that a lot. And I think the real truth is that the people who are sort of steering Ethereum have bigger things on their mind. They're thinking about things like, can the states attack the chain? Is it possible to do 51% attacks? Is it possible for lots of malicious actors to get rid of Ethereum entirely? So I don't blame them at all that sadly dApps are an afterthought. Most of the people steering Ethereum today either may have not made an app at all, or it's been many years since they have. So talking in the community, the common thing is, well, someone will figure this out eventually, right? And I hope that's true, but I really think we need to start thinking now about investing in sharding layer 1 in a composable way so that we can share liquidity and contracts between all of our projects that are building on it. So that's number 1. Number 2, total lack of privacy. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not a big fan of DAOs. I don't believe in this idea that we're all equal and we could all figure out what to do, because it normally ends up as a vegetable soup with every type of vegetable in it. I think what we need instead is some transparency, transparent hierarchy, transparent roles. We need to know who's actually in charge of things like the multi-sig. We need to know who's legally responsible, because somehow that DAO has to live somewhere. So transparency is something I do believe in. And the transparency part of DAOs, I'm a big fan of. In fact, if we took this to its logical extension, then many businesses where we're giving them money or we're trusting a lot of people could be transparent. Like this is the UK Cancer Research Charity. Every year they have to publish their books. This is what you see. But wouldn't it be nice if we could see a transaction by transaction on chain representation of where they're spending the money? And for something like the British Health Service, which we all know is in an absolute dire state, it would be nice to see the money going in from government and seeing what that's spent on. So transparency is a really good key asset of the blockchain when used correctly. And I really hope that eventually all public institutions will use it. But what about individuals? It's a very different matter when it's about what you're spending your own personal money on, I think. In fact, I would say what I spend it on is my business. So I would like to see a future where we have private individuals where their transactions are completely private, and public institutions where everything is completely transparent. To get there, we need to use some encryption for sure. But we should also ask the more genuine question of, should everything live in the blockchain in the first place? This comes up when we think about this issue, this very big issue, immutable data. And anyone who's trying to make a dApp today is faced with a dilemma. The dilemma basically is that we want our app to exist, even if we don't as a team. We want other people to build on the app, even if we're not here. So we put it on this nuclear-proof database called a blockchain. Nuclear-proof because it only takes one surviving copy of it to propagate through the entire planet. There's no way that you can delete it. However, the dilemma is the world is not yet ready for immutable data. In fact, the sort of thing I'm thinking about at the moment and the sort of thing I want to make involves something where somebody could come and say, actually, can you just delete that? I was drunk last night. I didn't really mean it. Can you take it and just remove it from the blockchain? And of course, at the moment, saying, oh, that's not possible isn't going to work very well. Despite the fact that it was 2013 when all the revelations came out about Snowden and the fact that data is always here and it's never ever going to be deleted, it's always kept for good, most people still believe in a world where they think that delete is possible. And when they start putting things on lens that they then regret and so on, it's going to be a very rude awakening to realize that that's not the way that the world has ever worked or will work when we go forward in a blockchain-based way. In fact, this is something I'm thinking about. How does the blockchain data actually sort of be affected by the EU right to be forgotten? Why is nobody talking about this? Very easy, because no Web3 app has yet to go mainstream. In fact, we've been doing this since 2014 in Ethereum, and still none of the people around this venue are going to be using any of the dApps that anyone here is making. Pretty sure about that, with a few exceptions. So one of the brave startups that go first, whoever that will face an onslaught of arrows from these regulators asking why this data from this poor individual user who doesn't know any better cannot be deleted and removed off the blockchain. So that's something to think about. The next issue is to where to put the front end, because so far we've been talking about decentralized services and open protocols and all the issues that that brings up. But the front end is also very important because it's the way that where the rubber meets the road. It's the place where the users actually have these emotional experiences with these products. But because of the App Store rules, as we know at the moment, dApps have to be web apps. There's no other way. But the lack of secure storage means that we end up with this abomination instead, where we expect everyone that uses dApps to have a laptop, to be rich enough to have a laptop, rich enough to buy some sort of secure wallet, and then work out how to put this extension on that joins the two together. I just don't think it's good enough, especially when we live in a world where by far and away, mobile adoption is higher than laptop adoption on every possible metric in every possible country. So we need to start as an industry prioritizing mobile, not just make it an afterthought, but make it the first thing that we do and desktop second. So what progress is made here? Well, thankfully there is some. The first thing is this project where it's called ETHOS, which is an operating system that you can download onto a fresh new Android phone. It tells you what type you need to buy. And now you have an Ethereum operating system, which is treating mobile as a first-class citizen. This is also possible on devices like this. This is a Samsung phone, which includes a secure enclave within the chip that lets you store the seed phrase in a secure place off the chip, which theoretically cannot be accessed even if your phone is lost or stolen. And then this is improved even more by the Solana phone, where the Solana phone has again this part of the enclave, the Qualcomm chip, which is storing the seed phrase securely, but also the rest of Android is not allowed to take screenshots or capture touch events or anything else to do with the signing of transactions. So you'll pass through a different part of the operating system entirely. The other advantage, I have to call out the Solana phone because I think it's a real innovation here, is that they also have a dApp store, a separate dApp store, which means that you can get your crypto app submitted to the dApp store without any fear that it's going to be rejected, which is a really big thing that all dApp developers think about at the moment. If anyone's interested in the Solana phone, I've got one here, and if you want to play with it later, come and let me know. So we need to get off dApps. We need to get off AWS, and we need to do that quickly. So what do we do? What do we do in a world where the front ends are typically censored, not the back ends? Well, we need to find a new place to put that front end. And this brings me nicely to what the hell is Urbit anyway? Because I've been looking for many years for a solution for this. Of course, one option, and I've seen several teams at hackathons I've mentored, actually make apps that are like Electron apps that give you front ends to Uniswap and things like that. All very good initiatives. But what would be much better is if we have a sort of cohesive solution for this sort of thing, a really obvious good place to put these front ends. So Urbit, first of all, is not a blockchain. It contains 0 blockchains at all. Instead, it's your own personal server. Think of it as something that you install apps into in the same way you install apps onto the Solana phone or your Android phone or your iOS phone. Same idea. The only difference with this, of course, is actually yours because you own and control it. It's open source code. The apps that you install can never be revoked or taken away because it's a truly decentralized open source system. In fact, you actually install them from other Urbit ships. A ship is just the name of someone running Urbit, basically. So it's truly peer-to-peer. So it's better than the Solana App Store because it's not a centralized app store. But how do you actually find these apps? Well, you use an Urbit app called Portal that's come out very recently. And what Portal does is it looks at the apps that you've already got and it sees what's trending and what's big. And through this, all by asking people on the network, you'll be able to find the apps that are currently built on Urbit. The nice thing about Urbit is that all your data lives in one place. So it's not scattered everywhere like it is on Gmail and MSN and wherever else you're going to put all your data. This enables composability from the ground up. So what can you use it for? Well, the way I think about it is that Ethereum is really good for global state. Global state is things where everybody must know at exactly the same time, for example, how much money is in someone's wallet, what tokens you own and control, what NFT is owned by who. Global state has to live in the blockchain, and obviously Ethereum is a great place to put it. But what about shared data? It doesn't have to be stateful. It can just be an image of something. It doesn't matter if that image gets there before or after anything else. Well, for something like that, you've got IPFS, Filecoin, or Arweave. Urbit is for everything else. That's none of those two things. So for example, if you like a post, if you like a group, let's say you want to subscribe to a group, well, that does not need to live in either of these two, right? It's just personal to you. So that's a good use for Urbit. So what can you do with it today? Well, it's still very infant in terms of what is available, but that's also the best place to be. Because one of the first things you can do is you can use this groups feature. And groups allows you to do what IRC did many years ago when I was growing up, which is to find really amazing, insightful, intelligent, like-minded people and have conversations. But this is way better than IRC because it's persistent, it's hosted on your own thing, I'll come to that in a second, and it's encrypted by default. Very soon, and I'm talking the matter of 2 months away, you will be able to have the Uniswap front end running on your Urbit ship in a completely unrestricted, uncensored way, thanks to a grant by the foundation, where this developer is now currently working on that. So how do you get Urbit? Well, in the past, it used to be very difficult. You used to have to be a really good computer engineer to work out how to install it on your own laptop or so on. But the nice thing about Urbit is that it runs everywhere. So you can host it on these central providers if you want. But the nice thing is, it's portable, just like your email. In fact, better than your email. You can take it from one provider to another, or choose that you don't want it in the cloud at all and host it on your own computer, your own thing in the basement or your own laptop. Okay, you can even buy one of these things, which is made by Native Planet, an amazing company that makes a box that looks like this. You put it in at home, and all of your private data now is hosted on here. You don't need to use AWS at all. But for the most people in this room, for the very limited time, I believe, you can go to this website, salon.io, where every day they give out so many free invites. So don't be, if they go today, probably will after this talk, just come back another day and you'll get a free invite to try Urbit on a hosted solution that they're running and controlling. Very much recommend giving this a go. And if you do like it and you don't want them to own your data, you've always got the option of moving it to your own hardware or any other hosting provider. So if you want to see more about what's possible with Urbit and where I think Urbit should go as a idea, as a product, as a community, that was the whole subject of this big 1 hour talk, where we go much more into the weeds of how apps work and how they should work in the future, with AI at the heart of everything that we do. Okay, if you don't want to see that, I've just found out 2 hours ago that I'll also be doing the whole talk again in Prague. That's on the 8th of June at this place here. So if you're in Prague, come and stop by. There'll be the whole talk that I've done at the Volcano Summit, plus a lot more discussion around what's possible and what we can do here. So to wrap up, I believe that very soon everyone will be making apps. It's an inevitability that soon all of you non-coders will no longer need to code to actually make apps, which I think is very, very good news. But all apps won't be created equally and they won't work the same way. And what really matters is what's going on in the HUD, in terms of under the HUD, in terms of where your data is stored and how it is processed. Dapps give us composable, solid foundations to build on, and I really believe they are the future, and there's no doubt in my mind that decentralized services will be a big part of what we do. But we also need good non-blockchain solutions too, and that's going to actually solve the missing link. So the future of apps is personalized interfaces, probably created by AI, to your personal taste. Lots of that in my big talk. Decentralized services, which we've talked about today, and composable data that you own and control, something like Urbit or something similar that comes along in the future. And then to conclude this talk, I just want to say that after sort of being in the Ethereum ecosystem since the beginning and advising lots of companies for the very first time, we're actually going to be building something myself, and me and my co-founder. And if you'd like to sort of get to know what we're doing and find out more, I'm looking at the moment for people who have got these skill sets, and that will be updated as time goes on. So thank you very much.